The government is facing fresh hurdles with, you guessed it, immigration. There are reports today that deportation flights to Rwanda that have never yet taken off could be delayed again. And for those migrants that are housed here, the government is considering reducing the capacity of the Bibi Stockholm, the barge you've heard much about. So has the Prime Minister overpromised on his pledge to stop the boats? A new survey says a whopping 66% of the public are dissatisfied by the government's handling of immigration. And today in the Commons, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, felt confident enough to attack Rishi Sunak on immigration. You know, that's not normally typical Labour territory.
On Sunday, the Home Secretary celebrated her first anniversary in post. That is, if you overlook the 6 days she missed when she was deemed a national security risk. In that year, 40,000 people have crossed the Channel on a small boat. And the taxpayer is now spending £6 million a day on hotel bills. He's failing to stop terrorists strolling out of prison, failing to guard Britain against hostile actors. He's completely failing to stop the boats. How can anyone trust him to protect the country?
Can he be trusted? Let's get a reaction to all of this now with the immigration lawyer, Ivon Sampson. Thanks so much for your time. Look, it seems that the Prime Minister has said many times in this pledge to stop the boats, there's going to have to be a multi-layered approach. We've got the Bibi Stockholm barge, we've got the Rwanda plan, but what we're seeing time and time again is significant hurdles in the government actually managing to get these policies live, active, working. Looking at sort of the headlines that we've seen today, Ivon, do you have much hope that actually a rigorous, sensible system is in place to manage people when they arrive here, work out who deserves to stay and who needs to be sent home?
Indeed. I mean, look, I have some sympathy for the government because when somebody comes to claims asylum here and we don't know what country they're from, they have no identity document, and suppose we refuse them asylum, what do we do with them? What does the government do with people that have come here, been refused asylum, when there's no effective returns policy? So that's a real problem that any government would face, including Labour or Conservative. So this is an international problem, requires international solutions and the international community working together with the UNHCR to come up with an effective plan. But the Home Office is in crisis. I mean, the spike in the number of people coming across the Channel that you've seen in the last couple of years, this is nothing. If you looking forward, we could be seeing 100, even 200,000 people coming across the Channel over the next few years, if you look at the trend. So we've got to have a treaty with the EU. There's no other way. We've got to be talking to our EU partners and have a treaty whereby we can return people who claimed asylum in other countries. Also, we need to have arrangements with the French to stop them getting into the boats in the first place. Finally, we need to also be working with the International Task Force, with Interpol and other criminal agencies to stop these smugglers. The government always puts the cart before the horse. They make announcements without really checking if their policies are lawful. And so far, they've all been unlawful.
We've got sort of multi-layered problems, don't we? First of all is that the boats aren't stopping. But the second one is, for the people who are already here, let's say Rishi Sunak, Suella Braverman did manage to stop the boats. We don't seem to have the right level of architecture and infrastructure to look after and properly sort through the people who are already here.
That's correct. In fact, if somebody comes here who has no identity documents, we don't know where they're from. They should be detained until we can determine where they're from. That's normal security policies for any law-abiding country. We don't do that. We've got people coming across the Channel from countries whose identity we don't know, and they're free to roam our streets. It doesn't inspire confidence in the Home Secretary. And there's a massive backlog of asylum cases. The government could easily grant asylum to countries, for those coming from countries like Syria, Eritrea, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq. The grant rates are 95%. Instead, it takes them 2 years to make those decisions. It doesn't make sense. They need to have effective policies and get their act together.
When we talk about effective policies, for you, the Bibi Stockholm barge, you know, at best, if all of those original rooms, 500, and what we're hearing now from the Times, what they're reporting is that that could be reduced even further. If all of those rooms were full, they're not full, no one's currently on it because the water conditions weren't deemed to be safe enough. Has that whole policy just been a sort of unhelpful deterrent distraction rather than actually grappling with the issues, which is often, you know, paying a huge sum to put all those people up in hotels?
Correct. And it's his headline is what they're seeking, that we're doing something about it. Look, if we get 500 people on each barge, we'd need about 100 barges to accommodate the people that are coming across. And also, if you look at the numbers of the cost of the barge, if you look at the cost of hiring it and the staff and all the security, the saving is about £11 a day compared to hotels. So again, the government wants to be seen to be doing something and not really doing policies that are effective and are going to tackle the problem. That is, and look, they've got an election coming in a year and a half. And I think most of their policies are aimed at how do we get back into power and not addressing the asylum problem and having an effective immigration system.
Ivon, thank you so much for your time. Ivon Sampson, immigration lawyer, giving us some of the details. For reaction to what we've just been talking about, I'm joined by my panel, the former Labour advisor, Stella Zandakidou, and also the political commentator, Russell Quirk. Good evening to you both. Stella, let's start with you. Are you surprised, you know, formerly advising the opposition, by what Keir Starmer had to say in the Commons today, which was a very rigorous and robust argument to say, look, Rishi Sunak, you're not dealing with immigration. Do you think Keir Starmer would have a better strategy?
I think he would have a better strategy because he would have a more competent team next to him. And this is the problem with this Tory government. It's not just ideology. It's not just about wanting to deal with the problem of asylum seekers. It is about incompetence. And this government, they cannot continue to point the finger back to themselves. They have been in power for 13 years. If it is someone who should have dealt with this issue by now, then it is this Conservative government. As you heard this immigration lawyer saying right now, and this is something that we've known for some time, there are a lot of these asylum cases, there are a lot of these people who have been waiting for many, many years, whose cases could have been dealt in a matter of months, and yet they're waiting for years, and they're costing the taxpayer money.
But what we're not clear about from the Labour Party is what they would actually do differently.
They would literally be more competent in the way the instructions that they're giving to the civil service, in the way that they are dealing with their internal matters. When you keep on having, when you keep on having reshuffles, when you are changing your cabinet, when you are changing your leadership, when you have a new prime minister, when you're constantly looking at having more elections, at having big, massive changes, and at arguing for policies that are just
competency, because they've got policies, they're just not able to execute them. You know, they've got legal problems in the way. Russell, Rosie,
they don't really have policy. What they have is headlines. So they grab a headline here and there by saying that the solution to this illegal migrants problem, this asylum, this fake asylum seeker problem, is that we're now going to house those asylum seekers in different places. Now, of course, the question of housing those asylum seekers is not the solution, that's the consequence. The problem is stopping people coming over in the first place. So obviously then you've got the incentive, which we should, in my view, turn into a disincentive. So instead of advertising on the government's website, as I've said many, many times, the fact that there's free money and free accommodation and free health and free housing to you as an asylum seeker, we need to stop that. Now, inarguably, we also then have to make sure that
the advertising of it,
stop the policy. So my point is, don't tell potential asylum seekers from overseas that we give you free cash and accommodation and so on.
What
and
reception
don't actually
should they
do
get
it.
then?
Well, they shouldn't get anything.
Nothing
They shouldn't
at
get
all.
anything. No, because if they're actually coming from, and generally 40-odd% of the people that are coming over on dinghies are not from Syria, they're not from war-torn countries like Afghanistan, they're from places like India and Albania, which are not war-torn countries. So, you know, those people coming over know that they are coming over as economic migrants, and therefore why on earth should the British taxpayer pay for those people to come over here and for them to be accommodated? Can I just make a point about Keir Starmer's speech today as well, which was, on the face of it, well made. Has Rishi Sunak and his cabinet, as you rightly say, Stella, failed when it comes to curbing illegal immigration? Yes, they have. And that's largely because the Conservative Party, the Conservative government, are not particularly conservative. But frankly, for Keir Starmer...
let's just say... Sorry, let's say the Rwanda plan was working. Would you have a different perspective now?
No, so the Rwanda plan should work on the basis of it being a disincentive. But because of a very feral, civil service and because of the European Convention on Human Rights, the government's policy is bound to fail because there are too many obstructions. But sorry, my point about Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer as a QC in 2007 was the defence barrister for alleged terrorists. He was the one that went to the House of Lords and tried to stop the government, actually partially successfully, from introducing a thing called control orders. So how on earth Keir Starmer can stand up in the House of Commons and dare to say that Rishi Sunak has failed when it comes to protecting these borders? Sorry, Keir Starmer's the very lawyer that tried exactly that, to try and defend terrorists.
It sounds like, Russell, you mean to say that if someone is taken to court because they're a suspected terrorist, they should not have a defense lawyer on their side.
What I'm saying
should
is...
we have... So what should we have? Should we have a panel like this?
No, can I answer?
Yes.
So what I'm saying is, as everyone has a right to a defence, and Keir Starmer absolutely had the right and, in fact, the obligation, you could argue, to be the defence QC at that time. However, you can't then, in a different world with a different hat on, as leader of the opposition that wants to be Prime Minister, say to the current Prime Minister who's failed on immigration, you're not very good at this because you're not protecting our borders.
I mean, Russell, you can. That's what you did today.
Why not?
It's hypocritical.
OK, that's different.
It's completely and utterly hypocritical.
You can say it's hypocritical.
It is hypocritical. So is it hypocritical for... So you are basically saying that lawyers should not be allowed to become politicians?
No, I think
you're saying.
You have to believe in one thing or the other.
Sooner or later, if you become a prosecutor or if you become a criminal... If you
Stella, do you know what I want?
Russell, let Stella finish.
If you work in criminal defence, for example, sooner or later, and you have to defend, let's say, you have to defend rapists, right? Sooner or later, you will have to legislate on domestic violence, on sexual violence. How does that
Stella,
point even make any sense?
That's a lovely, cosy ideology. But in my real world, I want my politicians...
It's not
Hang on,
ideology.
now I want to finish.
There's no logic.
Listen, please. What I want is my politicians to actually have some conviction and actually have some ideology, to actually believe in something. And Keir Starmer has got some brass necks standing up in the House of Commons criticising others for not protecting our borders when he's defended us against terrorists.
It's cognitive dissonance.
It's the same thing. It's hypocritical.
You are suffering from cognitive dissonance because on the one hand you are suggesting that you are basically saying that politicians that every single thing that they do in their lives is a political manifesto. That's what I'm hearing right now.
It comes back.
Let's pause there because I think we're getting distracted. Russell, in which case you think what Keir Starmer said today didn't have the right to say it, but do you think he was right in what he said? Has Rishi Sunak defended the borders of this country?
No. So I think Rishi Sunak has been an abject failure because he's not a Conservative. The next question, therefore, if you don't mind me saying, is Keir Starmer going to be any better? Now, again, forget Keir Starmer for a second and his own personal track record. What is Labour's track record when it comes to immigration? It's appalling. They have a policy, and always have, of open borders. This is the man that wanted us to go back into the EU after the Brexit vote and maintain we should have a second referendum.
Russell, I'm going to give you 20 seconds and then, Stella, you can reply.
So I've just said what I had to say, which is Keir Starmer is the man that was so keen on open borders that he wanted us to have a second referendum to go back into Europe. So don't tell me that that is a man that's going to protect us from immigration in the future.
The final word by
there
herself.
There is literally Ed Miliband, 2015, literally had a mug that said controls on immigration. And it was exactly because there are people who defend the Conservatives and will go live on TV and say the kind of lie that you just repeated, Russell.
What's a lie?
That Labour doesn't have a policy for controls on immigration.
We're going to leave it there.
They absolutely do.